Lifelong fulfillment, vision in action. You left. Lifelong fulfillment, vision in action. Live.
Well, good morning and welcome to Vision in Action Live this morning. I'm Jim Boswell. I'm your host. I'm the author of Lifelong Fulfillment, Take Charge of Your Life, its companion website, and this podcast. On the Vision in Action podcast, we focus on expert knowledge and solutions that facilitate individual personal development. These are the competencies that allow you to construct and pursue the complete vision of your best authentic life. So we bring you experts in every conceivable discipline to help inform your thinking about your own journey to lifelong fulfillment. So again, welcome. Today, we're very fortunate. We have a chance to visit with Lindsay Carnick, who is a licensed clinical social worker. She holds a master's in that, and she's the owner and founder of Onward Psychological Services, where she practices counseling around anxiety and relationships that serves adult individuals and couples. Lindsay comes to this as a graduate of Indiana University Graduate School of Social Work and the Graduate School at Purdue University, and has over 15 years of experience in this particular space. So welcome, Lindsay, to Vision in Action. We're very happy to have you here.
It's great to be here, Jim. Thank you. It's lovely to meet you.
Oh, great. Well, one of the things I want to make sure, if I missed anything in the introduction that you think is pertinent to our ongoing discussion, feel free to bring that forward. But maybe you could tell us and help us understand how this particular set of expert solutions under social work stands and is organized and operates relative to other things like coaching or, therapists and these sorts of things. And when we might be discerning that we individuals on the outside have the need thereof, right? The need of these kinds of services.
Great question. And a point certainly of, I don't want to say confusion, but at least maybe confusion for a lot of people.
Right.
So let's start with a little bit of an overview of some sort of nomenclature. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, an LCSW, and I have a master's degree in clinical social work. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of people who are working and licensed as therapists who have different credentials. Mm-hmm. So I'm a clinical social worker. There's a licensed marriage family therapist. There are licensed personal counselors. Then you have psychologists. You have a number of people. Psychologists can be either PhDs or PsyDs, which is another distinction. But all of those people have the potential to be licensed and fully trained as therapists and psychotherapists. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we can think of therapist or psychotherapist as sort of a very general term that applies to someone who is trained and licensed to provide therapy of some kind. Mm-hmm. And then we can sort of drill down a little bit and make some possible distinctions about emphases in the training for those folks individually. Now, when it comes to therapy, there's a lot of overlap because the gold standards are the same for everyone in terms of evidence-based therapeutic practices. And right. We're not going to have a LMFT and an LPC and an LCSW and a psychologist who have different views of evidence-based therapy approaches. Those are established and transcend any kind of specific licensure or designation. The distinctions we might make, and I think these distinctions are a little blurry as we become more and more interested and aware of holistic practice and how important that is for everyone. The social work trajectory was rooted originally in a desire to understand the total context in which people and their difficulties arise, perhaps more so than perhaps a traditional psychological background, which emphasized the individual level qualities. Okay, this person is suffering from this thing. What is it about them or their experience? Whereas social work might say, like, gosh, when you come from this environment with these factors that influence, that might all have a lot to do with the behaviors you're showing up with or the patterns you're stuck in. So
Mm-hmm.
at some point in time, and I would say this is quite some time ago at this juncture, there were some distinctions about how these different schools of thought understood the nature of the problem and the nature of human problems and human challenges. And I would make the bold assumption or assertion, really, that in 2025, these distinctions are much less important. Folks are emphasizing different areas of training, but those training, you can have a licensed marriage and family therapist who, focuses on that, but there are clinical social workers who absolutely do a focus and a specialty on marriage and family therapy. And
Right.
the training programs may have slightly different number of hours in this niche versus that niche, and some other components that are more flexible or less flexible that create an additional expertise in a certain niche. But at the end of the day, we're talking about people who are all trained to intervene in human suffering
Right.
from an evidence-based perspective. And I think that evidence-based perspective is the thing that we all are very, very focused on, right? We want to be providing people with help that has been demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt to be helpful.
Right.
And that is a unifying factor that I, of course, want to emphasize about any of these sort of professional credentials.
Right.
Myself, as a clinical social worker, I might just observe that one of the things that I had the opportunity to do in my training, in addition to being trained as a clinician in evidence-based therapy practices and therapeutic interventions, is I had the opportunity to train in policy analysis because
Oh.
social work is very interested in some ways in macro practice. What are the governing frameworks that influence people's qualities of life? How do these governing larger societal structures create opportunities for people to have successes and or failures? And how, as a society, can we maybe be interested in the ramifications of those macro level frameworks on people's lived micro experience?
Right.
So I had the opportunity to train in an individual intervention level, right? A clinical psychological level, but also really investigate and be exposed to these larger macro processes that have tremendous implications and ramifications for how people are able to show up very often. It is not quite as simple as like, do I wake up in the morning and decide to be my best self today, right? Your environment matters in terms of how you show up and what things are available to you and what opportunities, both for better or for worse, are available to you. And those things all have trickle down effects as we kind of move down the time space continuum.
Right. Well, your fact-based really resonates with our initiatives at Lifelong Fulfillment, because one of the frustrations that we tried to steer people away from is getting inspired and motivated and emotionally involved in things where the real answers are in the expertise that's been developed over, say, since 1940 or so. And so this really resonates with the kind of things we're trying to show our audience, is that there are authoritative solutions that you really can trust, and that resources like yours stem from that. So if we take that, your therapy kind of approach, do you do this individual? You mentioned couples. Do you do group? How does your particular implementation work?
My current practice is individuals and couples
Okay.
and some family work. So family might mean any combination of people, parent and children, adult child and parent, adult siblings, some various algorithmic formations of that for the
Right.
family work. So I've certainly done group work in the past. Group work is evidence-based, very good results. And in fact, group work is in some cases more effective for people. There's a certain number of impacts and effects that arise from when you get a group of people together that creates a whole is greater than the sum of the parts sort of a dynamic. And the experience of being in community, in a sense, right, with other people, and what that then elicits for people and the opportunities for growth that creates, it is own world of interesting and effective. And that's one of the reasons that there are many areas of practice in which group therapy is a core component. It's not just an option, depending on what works on your schedule. We have individual this night, group that night. They say, no, you need to be coming to these groups, because there's an acknowledgement that certain kinds of evidence-based group practice has remarkable ROI in terms of people's forward movement and getting towards their goals.
Right. So from the level of your experience, if I were a person who had an issue and I thought I needed that, how would I have actually found out about you or some other person who practices like you do? How do people come and reach Lindsay Carnick?
Well, in the philosophical sense, in the macro sense before the micro sense, I think in 2025, certainly the last 5-10 years, the emphasis on mental health awareness and destigmatizing things like therapy and mental health concerns has helped tremendously. And there are enough folks who have had some kind of experience with therapy, counseling, even if it's pastoral care, some sort of experience along these lines, or they know somebody, or maybe they've done some couples counseling, maybe they were in a group for something, maybe they know somebody who was in a group. So I think folks have a generally higher awareness that these services are available to everyone. And I think we've also done a really pretty good job of communicating that we don't want folks waiting until they hit some magical, awful threshold of bad enough to reach out. The old saying about something about rock bottom, like, no. We don't want rock bottom to be the triggering point for you to get help. Let's not do that. Right. So hopefully people have a greater sense of awareness that this is a world of services and help that is widely available now, and especially post-pandemic, the toothpaste is out of the tube on telehealth. So folks, I'm licensed in 10 states. I see folks remotely in 10 states across the country. And it's made things so much easier for people to not have to worry about driving and parking and waiting and traffic and picking up their kids. And, they can call in from work, they can call in from home, they can put their kid down for a nap and have an appointment. Telehealth has really democratized access to mental health care, right, in a way that has just been spectacular. And personally, and I'm not alone in this in terms of clinicians, I resisted initially. I did not like the sound of that. And then I became a believer. It's really remarkable how well it serves people and how accessible people find it and how well they are able to connect even remotely. And certainly I'm from a generation where I remember being in person, and I understand that has a special different feel than certainly something that's online. But the online experience has really gotten good, quite frankly, and lower barriers to access. So a little less generally, there are wonderful databases and directories of therapists and clinicians of all sorts, specializing in all sorts of things with all different credentials that are out there and free. There's one called Zen Care that's wonderful. There's one called Best Therapists. There's an oldie but a goodie called psychologytoday.com, which some people will recognize. There's a magazine associated with that. And they have a giant search database where you can cross-reference by your insurance, what kind of person you want, what flavor cereal do they like, the whole thing. You can dial in about as many different variables as one can imagine, and it will sort for you and give you a giant list of clinicians who are going to address the thing that you're interested in addressing. So finding people should not be difficult these days. Now, Folks can also go through their insurance companies, right? So you can call your insurance plan or get online to your online insurance portal, and there will be an extensive database for, just like there's a find a provider if you need an eye doctor or a regular PCP, there's a find a behavioral health person database on every insurance plan. And you, according to your plan, you dial in your location and this, that, and the other, and they will produce you a list of therapists who are impaneled to your insurance plan if that's where you want to start. So there are a million really accessible, easy ways to do it. I encourage people to do word of mouth. If you know somebody who's seeing a therapist, you say like, "Hey, what do you think of that person? They helpful to you?" Like, that's a great way to do it. I would say the most important thing, though, that I like to emphasize to people is fit matters. And the most credentialed person with the fanciest website on the planet, if you don't click with them, they're still not a good fit for you.
Right.
And so I really encourage people to ask potential clinicians that you might work with, whatever kind of therapist they are, no matter who referred them, ask them for a 20-minute introductory phone call to see if you're a good fit. And chat with them and see what you think. And you don't have to have all the magic right questions, and they don't have to have all the magic right answers, but you should have some sense that this person gets you and that they have some experience addressing the thing that you're wanting to address, and you kind of like their vibe, for a lack of a better word. And the other thing I like to tell people is if you start seeing a person, some kind of therapist, clinician, psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, and you go for 2 sessions and they are not your cup of tea, don't stick with it. You're not quitting. You're saying, you know what? Yeah, this is my time, my effort, and my dime. And it's important that I'm with somebody I click with. And you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to justify it any more than you have to justify not going back to someone who cut your hair and you didn't love the haircut. You don't call that person back and be like, well, just so you know, I really don't like the way you did my bangs. No, you just don't go back. Say, no, thank you. I'm going to try something else and move on to the next person. And it may take, usually this is not the case, it may take 2 or 3 people. And that's okay, because you want to establish a relationship with someone who has the potential to help you get where you want to be. And you having a good fit with that person is really important.
Right. Okay, so let's look at these issues that you're dealing with. Stress and anxiety, I guess, are, to paraphrase the long version, your focus. Maybe you could talk to us about, where does all this come from? Why do we get caught up in anxiety and stress? I mean, that sounds naive, I guess, but I'd like you to address it. And how do you engage that and help people through that process of dealing with, I'm just too stressed to operate, I'm anxious all the time, and that sort of thing. My experience, as you indicate, I've been to clinical social workers before for various and sundry reasons over the course of my life, and I was always in an office. Mine were generally major upset events like a death or a divorce or whatever like that. So I can't say that I know the stress and anxiety, although I'm sure some of it was there. So maybe you can tell us about your special area.
Well, anxiety, to start with, I think we can observe is a natural phenomenon that ultimately is a survival mechanism. Those who did not get anxious about the rustling in the bushes and run away when it came to our early ancestors got eaten. And that was that. Yes? So anxiety is fundamentally the most basic, perhaps, survival sort of tool we have above and beyond breathing and basic metabolism, because it keeps us safe. Right. And those who stay safe survive getting the gene pool, right? So I think interesting conundrum for us in 2025 is that we have what I like to call really old hardware. The hardware, the brainstem, some of the parts back here have not changed one lick since we started walking upright, probably a few minutes before that. And yet we're running new software up here in a modern environment. And the old hardware runs exactly the same way. It's going to keep you safe, whether you want it to or not, right? It doesn't think too hard about it because literally, if you slow down to think about the rustling in the bushes, you got eaten. Just run, right? The anxiety says better safe than sorry. Go.
Right.
Do not wait to see if that's a bunny or a saber-toothed tiger. Just run, get out. Yes. And that's still fundamentally how the system operates. So now here we are with these highly abstract prefrontal cortexes that have this imagination that's incredible. And we have symbolic language, which means not only can we have anxiety or an anxious response to some rustling in the bushes, we can think about rustling in the bushes and have an anxious response because now we can abstract about it. And not only can we abstract about these things that aren't happening, aka nothing's rustling in the bush, but what if the bush rustles? We can do this what if thing with abstract language that opens up this entire galaxy of things to worry about that aren't happening. And so for many, many people, stress and anxiety is a function of sort of being neurologically connected to these abstractions about what's not happening. Let me give you an example. You and I could both sit here and call to mind, respectively, or maybe collectively too, something that makes us feel kind of agitated, right? Something we're worried about that might be coming down the pipeline, something 2 weeks from now, or something that happened 2 weeks ago that we're not really quite sure yet how that's going to pan out. We have some anticipation out there. And we could sit here and simply think about it and raise our own blood pressure, just thinking about it. Now, that is an exercise literally in imagining something. We're sitting here in climate controlled environments with, nice lighting. The thing is not happening. And yet just by thinking about the thing, which is essentially imagining it happening or reimagining what already happened, we can trigger the fight or flight system. And because we live in a world functionally of thinking, because we have these giant brains that are essentially wood chippers with no off button, and they just think, chip, just day in and day out, there's this potential for us to live in this perpetual state of reactionary experience to thinking instead of real world events.
Right. And it sounds like we would be pretty good at imagining a lot of anxious issues.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And of course, we come by that honestly because part of our survival as a species is really contingent on our ability to imagine what might go wrong. I mean, you can take it down to a very basic level. The critter that looks at the sky and goes, "Ooh, storm's coming, ought to build a shelter," has a better chance of surviving than the one that's like, "I'm sure it'll be fine."
Right.
Those critters did not get rewarded, evolutionarily speaking, right, in terms of survival. So there's a negative sentiment override towards, we call it worry. That's the judgmental sort of like connotation we've given to it. But scanning the horizon for the next potential threat, which is imagining what it might be, is sort of a strategy that served us really well in a lot of ways. We could observe that maybe part of the difficulty for us in 2025 is that the horizon is much bigger and much more full of things. When you didn't have the internet, and forget the internet, when you didn't have phones, when you didn't have anything, when the only thing you had to worry about was the immediate environment that you could see, well, there's only so much stuff in the immediate environment. You're not being deluged by stuff on a constant basis that makes you wonder what could happen. There's only so many things in the immediate environment, right? It's the concrete world.
Yeah, the quantity is huge.
That's right. But once we get into abstractions, it's infinite. You can worry about things that are on the other end of the galaxy once you get into abstractions, right? I remember, I think kids have this sometimes, and I certainly remember having this. I remember thinking to myself as a kid, you'd find like an anthill, like a little anthill, and little ants would be, doing their thing. And I don't know if you experienced this. You don't have to tell me if you did or not, but I will own up to it. if I stepped on the anthill, because kids do stuff like that, you're just curious. You got to know what happens if you step on the anthill, right? Or
Yeah.
if you fill in a little hole, you know what I mean? You like see a little snake hole or something. You're like, what happens if I push the dirt into that, And then there's a kid part of you that goes, did I just change the course of something? Did that have ramifications? If I fill in this hole, this hole here, was there an earthquake in China? Like on the other side of the planet? Because we have this ability to abstract, because now I have a concept in my mind called China. I know that there's this thing on the other side of this planet, which is an idea that I, kind of abstract about. And there's something I'm doing over here could have ramifications for that over there, right? We have so many more points of knowledge that we can then worry about, right? Or kind of play the what if game about.
Yeah. So why do we emotionalize it as opposed to try and look at it dispassionately? Is that just, again, the old limbic brain back here saying, hey, everything you do needs to involve your emotions because they're so powerful? Is there a reason for that?
Well, I might say that it's a cause and effect more than a reason. But
Okay.
let's think about this. Let's think about it out loud. Certainly emotional valence, the degree to which we experience some kind of feeling along with the thinking, right, has an adaptive quality. So let's just take the simple example again of looking at a dark sky, right? If I look at a dark sky and a little piece of my fight or flight system goes, that seems bad, right? That activates me to action faster. Those feelings drive a bigger response that in theory could be more protective. It's spurred me to some sort of action that ultimately maybe saves me faster, right? If I see a drooling saber-toothed tiger and I'm like, well, I don't know, could be, maybe could not, maybe that's a nice one, I don't know, maybe I already had lunch, my chances of getting eaten are still higher, right? So I think we can say about the fight or flight system that the general theme is err on the side of caution and err on the side of survival. And when we have emotional responses to things, that activates us in a much more bright, immediate go time kind of a way than if we don't have an emotional reaction. It is interesting, though, and this is one of my favorite things to be interested in and to marinate on. It's a source of endless interest to me, is the way that our feelings start to feed the thinkings and then create a cycle, right? So we could say, let's pick a very concrete example. Ooh, I don't like snakes. So let's say I see a snake, yeah, and I feel a little like, because that's how I feel about them. And that's just what happens when I see snakes. That feeling reinforces to me that thing's dangerous.
Right.
Even though me having the feeling doesn't change the level, either the thing's dangerous or it's not, right? Me feeling that way doesn't change the danger level, right? A garter snake is a garter snake, whether I feel anxious about it or not. Garter snake is still harmless, and a pit viper is still harmful. And there are people who can handle pit vipers with no anxiety whatsoever, right? But that doesn't change the fact that it's not dangerous. So we get into this interesting feedback loop of thinkings, feelings, thinkings, feelings, thinkings, feelings. Another really common example for folks is, we actually have an expression for this, we call it emotional reasoning. Folks will have an interaction with somebody in their lives, and they'll hang up the phone, so to speak, and then they'll have a thought such as, ooh, did I just offend my friend? I don't know, was she weird at the end of that call? Did her voice change? And when they have that thought, then all of a sudden they have a little feeling that's like, uh-oh, what if I offended my friend? What if I said something, that my friend didn't like? And then the feeling creates another thought that's like, I did say something that offended her. She's upset with me. And then that thought creates a feeling of upset in us, right? Because nobody likes the idea that you've upset your friend. And then you feel upset. And the more you feel upset, the more it becomes fact that you've upset your friend in your mind, even though you still have no more evidence of this than you did when you started this down spiral, right? So we do this emotional reasoning thing very, very quickly where we translate feelings into facts. And then the fact reinforces the feeling, and the feeling reinforces the fact, and so on and so forth. And of course, this also works in the other scenario. Every time I buy a lottery ticket, it feels like a winner. And you can bet I'm making the list before the right. Like I got a list this long of what I'm doing with this, right? Like it's so easy to be like, it feels like a winner, so it is a winner. And look, I wasn't born yesterday. I'm aware of what the statistics are in winning the lottery. Like I get it. And yet that feeling is so strong, right? That the mind just goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. What are we doing with this? So emotional reasoning plays a tremendous role for most people in their experiences of stress and anxiety because it creates a degree of validity to abstract thoughts that has nothing to do with the validity of the thought, but it feels true or it feels real. And we go, good enough. It feels like she's mad at me, so she's mad at me.
Right.
And then we proceed to freak out about that.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's interesting also that what I think I'm hearing you say indirectly is we're prone to trust our emotions when we probably should not be doing that. Okay. I tend to have the habit of, I would say I'm pretty strong on gut feelings, but I have a real distrust of that. I always say, okay, so what do the numbers tell me? What kind of book can I read or see some authoritative source that can either validate it or deny it, right?
Yes.
So I tend to do a lot of back checking because for whatever reason, I'm a little distrustful of my emotions. Now, that doesn't necessarily ride well with some of my friends because they expect me to be sensitive, right? To emotionally understand their context, right? And again, I tend to go back and say, oh, well, did you mean this? Or did I accidentally say something wrong here? In other words, I try and come back to the fact of the matter as emotion. Just my personal experience, maybe not universal, but still.
I think that's something that most of us have experience with and most of us struggle with if we get down. I mean, there's a very interesting emphasis in this culture world on gut feelings and also what it means to be authentic. And authentic means in some circles that your feelings are what's real. And we can maybe start to differentiate between real and true. Because your feelings are always real. That's for sure. Absolutely. Now, the degree of truth you assign to the narrative going along with those feelings is a completely separate issue, right?
Okay.
And I think I love to use this wisdom from a guy named Chad Lejeune, Dr. Chad Lejeune, who's a working psychologist who I just think the world of. And we can think about a feeling like a fire alarm. Now, in your years on the planet, how many times have you heard a fire alarm go off and there was actually a fire?
Maybe one or two at most.
And what percentage would you say is that of all the times you've heard a fire alarm go off?
Very low percentage, yes.
Yeah, because fire alarms go off when A, the battery is low. B, you took a shower that's too hot and the steam has, gotten up to the detector. C, somebody turned on the oven and there was some char left in there from the last person and now that thing's smoking in the oven, right? D, E, F. I mean, there are a million reasons fire alarms go off other than there's a problem, other than there's a threat. And so the challenge with this idea of trusting or not trusting your feelings is that I think we've got the wrong idea about what it means to trust your feelings. You can trust your feelings that it's a feeling, for sure. It's a feeling and it's real. Just be careful about translating real feeling into truth about something, because those things frequently are wildly divergent. I'll tell you a really funny story about this because I think alarms and detectors are such a good example. I was in my home one day and my husband accidentally he fell off something and kicked the carbon monoxide detector. It was really remarkable. You couldn't make this happen another time. It was like a perfect combination of angles and forces, right, and positions. And so he kicks the carbon monoxide detector. And wouldn't you know it, when you kick the carbon monoxide detector exactly in that way, it goes off and it starts screaming. This thing is screaming in a mechanical voice, carbon monoxide, get out, exit the premises. And I'm like, losing my mind, because I mean, that's scary. And what I'm feeling is real, but it's not true that there's carbon monoxide, right? Now, the fact that that's untrue has no bearing on making that feeling go away, right? I'm like, well, this is how it ends. I'm doing my life review. This is it. Here we go. I don't know. And so our feelings are really reliable alarms to the degree that any alarm is reliable. And what Chad Lejeune points out is that an alarm is not the same as a fire. And that's where we tend to get fouled up, right? Is conflating the alarm with the threat, because not all alarms actually indicate a threat. It indicates something.
Right.
Maybe your husband kicked a carbon monoxide detector. That's not a threat. I mean, something did happen, but not the thing that the alarm is saying happened. So if we can start to think about maybe some of these feelings as important, like flags that indicates there's something you should look at. Yeah, you should look at it without assuming a meaning.
Okay.
If your gut says something, seems like something you should pay attention to, but it doesn't mean you should make your decision based on that any more than you should call the fire department based on the first time your little alarm beeps and there's no smell of smoke. You're like, is battery?
Right. Okay. So how do you're helping people understand this type of thing, emotions, facts, probability, right? Does this become a routine I can learn? If I'm over here way stressed out and way anxious about, well, probably not one thing, but a bunch of things.
Sure.
Your process would let me narrow that down to what really has substance, right? Because you're qualifying it, that not all things are created equally urgent. Some things are
even when they feel equally urgent.
right.
Yes.
Yeah, you may feel like taking out the trash is urgent, but in the real scheme of things, it's not big. So that's nice, because then I can come back into balance, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right.
And I think the most important part of the work for people, and it is so doable, which is so exciting. It's so accessible. It's so doable. This is available to everybody, and it doesn't take years. It really, really doesn't. Is starting to develop an awareness of how this stuff works.
Right.
So that one can do something differently given what we know about how it works. We're not going to overhaul the system. The system is set. The system does what it does.
Yeah. Get that.
And we can learn how to operate it differently. And that is so, so, so doable. And these are tools and skills, and they're very concrete, that anyone can learn and anyone can practice and anybody can refine over time. And some of these skills work better for some people than others at different times, and et cetera, et cetera. I think ultimately my hope is that we're all developing toolboxes that we can draw from, given any set of conditions or contexts, unique to us, not unique to us, first time, 40th time. And we can go, oh, I got some things I can do to help myself have a better experience here. Yeah, I can do this. I can work with this. And really the goal in my mind of therapeutic work is always to get people out of therapy and living their own lives and accessing these tools. And then you come back if you need some help, and then you go away again, and you come back and you go away. And that's great. And we're going to have as long of a relationship as you want. intermittently finding new tools for you that apply to new scenarios that have come up. And that's a time to learn a new tool and to discover something new and have another tool to add to your toolbox. And then you go out and teach that to somebody. And hopefully that's how it works for people. So yes, these skills are so doable and so learnable. And, for folks who ask, there's, for some people more than others, depending on, your age, some imaginings around what therapy is like, right? And New Yorker cartoons about people like recumbent on a Chase lounge, free associating, right? And the person sitting behind them, with a clipboard kind of a thing. And there can be, we're really talking about two primary ideas here, cognitive behavioral, which is a very applied sort of thing that I was just speaking about, and psychodynamic theory, which applies a little more to how these patterns got to be for you, how they are, right? And I like to share with people, because this has been my experience and I find it to be relatable and repeatable again and again and again, is that a little bit of psychodynamic work, which is some curiosity about how your current patterns of doing business and your current tools got put in place, can be really, really helpful. Sometimes we learn to use tools at a very specific time and place. And in that specific time and place, that tool is the best thing we have available. And that's what gets us through, and that's what gets it done. And that's great. And maybe later on, in a different time and place in your life, that tool is no longer as helpful as it was in that other time and place. And maybe it's even maladaptive. Maybe it's even not helping you, it's hurting you a little bit, right? And being curious about how we got sort of like deeply wedded to certain tools because they were helpful at one point in time helps us let go of them and replace them with other tools that are not better, they're simply more relevant to what's going on now.
Right.
And I find that deeply compelling.
I do too. So we need to kind of bring this to a close. So I'd like to make sure that everybody knows how to reach out to you if they want to reach you. And you said you're in 10 states, so obviously you practice at a lot of time zones. So maybe you could refresh that for the audience, and then they know how to reach you.
Sure. I have a website, is onwardpsychservices.com. Onward, PSYCH, onwardpsychservices.com. I'm also on Instagram at Onward Psych Services. Every Wednesday and sometimes Fridays, I put out a practical tactical coping skill video, which are just so much fun, and I love them. And they're little spiritual metaphors and practical tactical ways of doing things that I hope are helpful to people. So that's really fun for me. So Instagram at Onward Psych Services, on the web. I'm on LinkedIn. I also have a phone number. Allegedly, those rectangles, you can like call people.
Yes.
Those things make calls. It's crazy. Mind blowing. But people are certainly welcome to call me or text me at my phone number, which is 720-362-8164. That's all. It's on my website, and there's a contact us form and an email address. There are lots of ways. I really like carrier pigeons. I think carrier pigeons are like cat's pajamas. So if one would like to reach out with a carrier pigeon, I would be thrilled. Absolutely thrilled.
Okay. Lindsay, thank you so much. This has been very educational, and I think, the audience has really enjoyed this. And thanks for bringing your story to Vision in Action.
It has been my absolute pleasure. Thank you, Jim.
Hope to see you again soon, okay?
You too. Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye now. Well, that's our episode for today. I'd like to thank our guest today, Ms. Lindsay Carnick. I think she had some genuine insights to offer for all of us. And thank you for attending Vision in Action Live today. I certainly hope you got some insights that you can use as well. Our future episodes will also look at some coaching solutions, personal finance, divorce, and some other expert solutions. So stay tuned for those. Our podcast focus on interviews with subject matter experts and people leading self-directed lives so that you can see exactly what one can accomplish doing your own personal development. So check out newsletters, podcasts, and the reference materials at lifelongfulfillment.com. You can reach me there if you'd like. And you can see our podcast on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and your favorite podcast channel, and also on KFRED Internet Radio, which is distributed widely. So until next episode, you might want to think about how is your anxiety level faring. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week.
Lifelong fulfillment.